Hi there. There's something pretty crazy going on in America, and honestly, it's pretty exciting too. If you've been following the news, you've likely heard about the Christian revival movement that has been going on at Asbury University as well as other universities across the country. Today, we're going to get into a little bit of a glimpse of what went on in Wilmore, Kentucky, through the eyes and the ears of our new friend, Pastor Doug Hankins from the First Baptist Church in Orlando. He was there and helps us appreciate in detail what this awakening looked like from the inside. Plus, there's a bonus conversation about the movie Jesus Revolution. So let's jump in. We are on Amazing Greats. It's Rick Hansen here with my guest. It's Pastor Doug Hankins from Orlando, Florida. So we're exactly opposite poles of the country here. We are as far apart as we could possibly get, but we are together here on Zoom, and I sure appreciate your time here, Doug. Thank you so much for being with us. Brief introduction.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. The brief introduction. You're pastor of the First Baptist Church in Orlando. You hold a PhD in historical theology from the Trinity Evangelical Divinity School with an interest in revivals and revivalisms. And that's kind of where we're going to head on this podcast today. Can we, first of all, start out with a quick, Doug's story? I saw somewhere that you were, or maybe heard somewhere, that you were an atheist and now you're a pastor. There must have been something going on between this and that. Tell me the story.
Yes, you heard correctly. I was an atheist growing up in the sense that I was raised in a home that was, my mom was interested in church. My dad was not interested in church. And so he was as far away from Jesus as one could be. And we subsequently did not go to church except funerals and weddings. And we didn't go to that many funerals or weddings. My mom took me to a Methodist church during my middle school years to go to confirmation. And I went to this confirmation class, and it might be that they talked to me about Christianity and the gospel, but I don't remember it. My eyes were not interested in that, darkened. My mind was not open to that. And so as an eighth grader, I discovered the term, and it was atheism. And I said, yeah, that's pretty much what describes me. I don't believe there's a God. I don't need a God for my life to function and find meaning. And, there were some breakups with some girlfriends because of that, because I dated some Christian girls and they wanted me to be a Christian, and I just wasn't going to be that. So that's kind of how I started in life. Now, how did I get to be a pastor or even a Christian and then a pastor? I think I'm the trifecta here. I'm a Christian, I'm a theologian, and I'm a pastor. So that's like as professional Christian as you could be, right?
Yeah.
The quick version of that is that I had a best friend growing up who was a Christian, and we had a love of music. We were both from the Houston, Texas area and moved to a smaller town in Northeast Texas called Palestine. And that friend would invite me to come to church all the time. And I would say no all the time. So that just kind of stuck in my brain that I knew there was this category called church out there. I didn't really know what it was. I had gone to this Methodist church, but I still didn't really have a clear picture of that. And then my parents went through a divorce when I was in eighth grade, and my world got really rocky. And there was a number of there were a number of things going on in my life I just didn't have answers for. There were questions I just could not figure out. Some would call them the four great philosophical questions, right? Who are you? Where did you come from? Where are you going when you die? What's the meaning of life? And I admit, as a 13, 14, 15-year-old, I did not have great answers for that. And those kind of things bother me as a human being. If I don't have answers to questions, if I'm curious about those questions and I don't have answers, I try to find the best, most compelling answers. And I don't care where they come from. I just want a compelling answer. And I came to realize that atheism didn't have great answers for me. Who are you? Well, you're this human being that just kind of exists. Where'd you come from? You're a product of chance over time. You won the genetic lottery. The earth was tilted it just so that you could be there. What's where do you go when you die? Well, you just cease to exist. Okay. And what's the meaning of life? It's whatever you make it to be. If you have more power than your neighbor, then you can dominate them should you choose. And if you don't want to dominate them and live in harmony, I suppose you could do that. And it was okay. These were okay answers, but I just I was deeply suspicious that there were better answers out there in the universe. And so I got an Encyclopedia Britannica in my house, and I pulled religion, the R section, off the shelf, and I started thumbing through and reading through all about religions. And I tried to read every other religious tradition other than Christianity because I just didn't. I had a bad taste in my mouth for no reason about that. Well, the other religious traditions, they were good, they were compelling. Buddhism, which is somewhat a religion, somewhat philosophy. Eastern religions, Islam, Judaism. I like portions of, but I finally got to Christianity, and doggone it, was really compelling. And so I kind of just put a pin in it there as a eighth grader, ninth grader. In between my ninth grade and 10th grade year of high school, I was assigned the Bible as core summer reading for my advanced English class, AP English or whatever,
Oh
because
boy.
we were reading, we were reading The Grapes of Wrath. And if you didn't understand certain Old Testament passages, you wouldn't pick up on the allusions that Steinbeck was mentioning there. And so this public school teacher wanted us just to have a rich humanities experience. And so I was a cross country long distance runner. So I was pretty disciplined. I would wake up in the morning at 5. I would read this Bible. I would journal about it and think about what I was reading for my homework. Then I would go for a run, and then I would come back and I would take a shower and I would read the newspaper. And I had what Christians refer to now as a quiet time or a devotional time. I was having one of those, but I didn't know what that was because no one had orchestrated this except I came to realize maybe God had orchestrated that. And so I would read the Bible, and in the mornings before I went to work or went to school, my summer job, I would read the newspaper. And I came to see the way the Bible described humanity and the world and the way the newspaper came to describe the humanity and the world were the same. And when that started happening for me, I started to realize that Christianity was the most compelling worldview out there. And I began to think about those 4 questions in light of Christianity. And when I came to realize that they were the most compelling answers, I came to first realize there must be a God. And then number 2, that Jesus must be that God. And that took about, I don't know, that was about a 6-month process from start to finish when it all went down.
Wow, wow, wow. So let's wind up to today because
Okay.
there's something compelling going on in America today that kind of started with a youth Christian revival in a little town called Wilmore in a university called Asbury. And you had an opportunity to be there. And I want to jump into that experience because everybody is talking about it. It's being written about. There's YouTube videos about it. It is an amazing revival of Christianity amongst this group in Kentucky. But I saw your article and it said the ordinary and the extraordinary, a day at Asbury. And I thought to myself, this is pretty compelling. Let me read this. And so you were kind enough to come on and share that piece with us and hopefully dig a little deeper into the guts and the emotions, the spirituality that existed on your day in Asbury that day. So first of all, this was uh, brought on by your church. They said, "Do you want to go do this?" And you said, "Yeah." Right. And so
Yeah.
here you are on a plane headed to Asbury. Tell us what happens from that moment forward.
Yeah. So I landed in Louisville because that was the best airport to fly direct from Orlando. And I wasn't sure if I was going to get into the airport and I was going to discover that everybody in the airport was somehow praying and singing worship songs. I didn't know, but I got into Louisville and it was just normal. It was early in the morning. I think I flew out at 6 or something like that and landed at 8, or I flew out at 8 and landed at 10. That sounds right. I flew out at 8 and landed at 10. And it was normal. I had no bag, so I just walked right to the rental car place. They gave me the keys to my car. I got in my car. I drove immediately, and in an hour and 20 or an hour and 30 minutes, I was in Wilmore. And so I get out and I park, and I've never been on Asbury's campus. I knew about Asbury because there's a famous pastor of evangelism and missions called Robert Coleman, and wrote a book called The Master Plan of Evangelism. And he taught at Trinity, but he also taught at Asbury. And so I knew of Asbury in relationship to that. And so I get on campus and I'm trying to orient myself. I'm one of these people. I'm looking around. It's not like there are people there. Again, this is not a coordinated effort. If you go to a mega church now, they've got people in the parking lot saying, "Come this way." There's nobody in the parking lot. In fact, there are cars that are all parked askew, and it looks like maybe the rapture happened. And I didn't know. I was like, "Oh no, maybe I am not a Christian. I'm still here." I didn't know what was going on. But I finally get into the heart of campus and I realize I'm on the seminary side, and all these people are walking the other way. And I go, okay. So I walk across Lexington Avenue, which equally kind of divides the campus between seminary and college. And I could just see the giant Gothic courthouse structure that is Hughes Auditorium. And there's 1,000 people lined up outside. And I'd heard the reports that you're going to wait in line. And, I'm in Orlando, so I go to Disney. I'm used to all of these lines. So I get in line. There's no fast pass. Like I can't just cut to the front. I couldn't show my pastor card, couldn't show my theologian card. No one really was asking or concerned about that. It was just, we're in line and we're all wondering what the Holy Spirit is up to, if the Holy Spirit is up to something. And so I get in line, there's 1,000 people in line, and this lady is walking by talking to us. They're offering water. And she says, "There'll be 4 times as many tonight." And I went, "Oh my goodness, what is this experience there?" So those were my first impressions. I can go into more detail if you like.
Are you having, at this point, do you have conversations with other people around you, and they're as questioning as you are as to exactly what's going on? Or is there any conversations about the Holy Spirit? Is there conversations about Jesus? What's happening in line?
Yep. So if you know about the writer, the journalist George Plimpton, I think that's who I'm talking about, right? He would embed himself on an NFL sideline and just, try out for special teams or whatever, because he wanted to experience it. He was a participant observer. I kind of thought that's what I would be. Okay, Lord, I'm here, but I'm also trying to just observe, and I want to participate, but I want to observe anyway. So I'm kind of wrestling with what posture to take here. And the people in front of me just turn around and they go, "So where are you from?" And now my extroversion kicks in. I'm like, "Well, I'm from Orlando." And so we get into this conversation. Turns out the group in front of me is from Cincinnati, and they are part of a Nazarene church. And they are the lady who came down, who led the trip. She is a leader in a Nazarene church there in the Cincinnati area. And she'd heard about it from her young adult small group that she led. And they had seen it on TikTok. And so that's how she had heard about it. This is a week into the revival. And so her pastor had already gone down once or twice, and he talked about it on Sunday. And so they decided to make, I think it's a 2-hour drive down to check it out. And she didn't have anybody go with, so she called one of her prayer partners. And this lady was like, "I'll go with you." So they just drove down and they got in line. And this lady who I was speaking with would talk to me about what's going on and her expectations. And then she would just start crying. And it wasn't like she was sad. She was just so excited and anticipating something positive happening that it was overwhelming for her in the moment. And this is where the ordinary extraordinary comes in, because she would be crying and then she would just start praying for God to break the hearts of the young adults she knows. She started praying for people, and then she'd open her eyes and dry them and look around, and then she would just ask me where I'm from. Right? "Okay, so where are you from?" And this was totally normal in line. I mean, people in front of me, people behind me, this was just going on. People are looking at their calendar on their phone, making plans. So, okay, I can be here. The Holy Spirit can move for 3 hours, but then I have to get back and I've got to, take the dog for a walk. And so that was kind of the ordinary stuff. And yet everybody was at peace and hopeful and curious and expectant in a way that I think you would probably normally associate with, going to see your favorite band in concert, or going to see a movie that everyone has talked about, seeing if it'll live up to the hype. And there was just this sense there. And so that was in line. That's mostly what we talked about, as we all kind of walked together towards the front.
And how about you? Did you find yourself being not only a spectator but a participant at that point, feeling the Holy Spirit yourself? Were you drawn to that as well, or were you a little more detached, trying to be more of a observer?
I wouldn't say I was detached. Um, I'm a pretty charismatic person theologically. In other words, I tend to wake up. I've had enough experiences with God to know that I should expect the unexpected. So when the unexpected things happen, I shouldn't go, "What is this?" Like, "Oh my goodness." Instead, I've tried to take the posture of, well, okay, the Lord moves in mysterious ways. I know him, but I don't know everything about him because everything about him cannot be known. But what I know of him, I can trust. And so, but part of what I've learned about God in my life is that he's going to do some things from time that are kind of miraculous, and that there are going to be things that I would chalk up to coincidence if I didn't know better. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
And so I would say definitely those kinds of things are happening in line in the sense that, um, for example, this couple in front of us, these two ladies, they were from a particular neighborhood in Cincinnati that some of our best friends are from. And I don't know anybody else in the world from this neighborhood. And so they just turn around. I say, "Oh, you're from Cincinnati. What part?" And they tell me the neighborhood. I go, "Oh, my one of my best friends is from there." So I call her. Her name's Britt. I call her, and we're now all of us are on the phone talking about the friends that they all know. So Britt, in fact, it's a good time to bring her. Her name's Brittany Nelson. She used to be on my staff. She's my wife's best friend. Her husband. We're all best friends, right? Brittany goes. Brittany has this phrase. She will say, "Creepy Jesus." Now, she doesn't mean that in the negative, but what she means is, if I didn't believe in Jesus, this would be creepy. How coincidental it is. And so Britt will just say, "Creepy Jesus," and this was just this creepy Jesus moment. It's just like something that goes beyond explanation. So as those kinds of things are happening when you're in line, if you don't have goosebumps and your hairs aren't raised a little bit, it starts to happen. If I could put it into cinematic terms, I would say it's like a John Williams score that slowly builds. And at some point you realize, oh, I've been listening to music for the last 3 minutes. It's just been quiet and getting louder and louder. And that's what it's like walking up experientially to the columns of Hughes Auditorium.
So you finally make it into the auditorium, Hughes Auditorium. Is it magnificent inside? Is it what's the scene? I'm sure it's packed for one thing, but what's it feel like inside the building?
Have you ever, I don't know if you've done this, so it's a reference. Have you ever been in any of the cathedrals in Europe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, when you go in, sometimes there's a line, you've got to pay your little donation fee and you go through the narthex and you get in and then you see this, marble, Gothic spired cathedral, whatever, it's high ceilings. And you sit in it and you can tell it's this huge room that was designed for an older generation of Christians that can't fill it up now. And when you look around, you notice that everyone's just kind of sitting there politely and it's quiet. And people sit there just long enough to do the relational capital in their or calculus in their head to realize it's time for me to leave now, but I don't want to make a scene. And everyone's being really polite, but the space itself kind of has its own feel and energy to it. And that feel and energy is, I wouldn't say reverence, it's reflection. This is a space designed for reflection. Okay. Well, Hughes Auditorium is a 100-year-old building. It's designed to be the Protestant equivalent of a reflective space. It's, it's probably 1,500 seats, I think 1,489 seats, but maybe 800 on the floor and then the rest up top in a horseshoe balcony. It's just got a standard stage. There's no screens, or there may be screens, but maybe there are screens. I couldn't see them, but there's no tech. There's no LED panels. There's no lighting rig. You don't have the guys and the girls in the black shirts with the headsets walking around, making sure that the decibel levels are appropriate for the senior adults, right? None of that stuff's going on. It's an older worship space that's designed for reflection. And it has that energy just in its architecture, except it's packed and people are all just dialed in and you can feel it. It's a calm energy. It's like watching Michael Jordan in 1992 when the Bulls are playing the Portland Trailblazers. And I'm sorry if I just triggered all of your Pacific Northwest fans with this memory. It's when Jordan comes in and he just comes on the court and he's just calm and you just know he's going to dominate. That was kind of the vibe collectively that, hey, God is up to something and we're all kind of relaxed, but watching and praying as best we can to try to discern what the Lord is up to in this moment. Another way of putting it is It's Mark 1:15, right? So in Mark 1:15, Mark is talking about Jesus coming onto the scene. Jesus steps up and says, repent and believe, for the kingdom of God is at hand. That's kind of the summary of it. There's just kind of this pronouncement that's experienced by everybody in this old building where you think we're going to be reflective, but no one's being reflective. I mean, there are some people. People are dialed in, and the goosebumps are there, and all the hair standing on the back of your neck, and everyone is just kind of chill with each other. And someone gets up on stage and says, "Let's sing a song," and people just stand up and you start singing songs. And there's none of it's programmed, none of it's produced. It seems spontaneous, but there's kind of a coordination that's happening, and you realize it's not so much humans that are coordinating it, although that's going on. There's something else at play. There's an X factor, and that's Jesus. And so all of us have concluded that it's Jesus.
I just love that. You almost my hair was raising up on the back of my neck just getting your description of that. That's fantastic. Now, I understand there was kind of a sequence of how things went, whether that was designed or it just happened that way. But it was a pattern that happened on the stage where there would be somebody come up and give their testimony. At that point, there would be repentance, and then prayer, and then worship, and then when that was over, somebody else came up, and it went through kind of the same pattern. Is that what you saw as well?
Yeah, there was an ebb and flow of people coming in and exiting at different moments because, again, there's 1,000 people outside, there's 1,500 people inside. At some point, 100 people get up. And as soon as they do, there are ushers all around just doing seat spotting, going, all right, they're just turning around like, hey, Lenny, let the next 100 people in, right? Just there's some guy there who's yelling out at Lenny, but they're doing it really kindly. No one's mad about that. But so the next 100 people come in and they sit down, and they come in mid song, they come in mid prayer. No one's on the outside going, oh, hold on for a second. There's a sequence in motion. Just wait. Okay, my production manager said you can come in. None of that. It's just, hey, there's 100 seats. Let 100 more people in. There is just such a sense of trust from the stage leaders that God is at work. So the people are going to sing the songs. So let's just pick the songs that are on the top of our heart, and we're going to proclaim them as prayers set to song. And people are just going to start singing along if they agree. And so Waymaker, Maverick City Stuff, Promises, Firm Foundation with Cody Carnes, all the there's stuff Brandon Lake's coming up with. It goes in Graves in the Gardens, and heavy dependence on the choruses. I'm sorry, on the choruses as opposed to the verses, right? So because choruses can be sung multiple times, so there's very little instruction. No one's saying sing with me. They're just singing it. But by virtue of singing it twice, people are starting to get two data points in mind, and it's forming a trend, and people can just start following the trends.
So. And what about stories? What about testimonials? Did you hear some powerful from the gut, from the heart, stories on stage that you can recall?
I think that's a great question. I did, but I think sometimes we associate powerful, kind of emotional or moving testimonies, sometimes because of what happened, but even more so because of the production value behind the telling, where someone has coached this person on how to do, before I met Jesus, da 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 da, and then I met Jesus in this powerful way, and since I met Jesus, here's the fruit of things, and it fits this common narrative. And so when it's told in a slick way, in a produced way, we really like that. There wasn't any of that. I would describe most of the testimonies as raw. And I would also describe most of the testimonies as brief as opposed to long. And typically they were heralded in an announcement type form. So for example, someone gets up and says, hey, we have a brother here who just prayed to receive Christ. Let's celebrate. And the brother comes on stage, and everybody cheers, and then they pray for him, and then he and a friend walk off stage, and they're like, let's sing again. Those were more common, although I'm sure there were things that were maybe atypical from that style. Again, I'll also just say this is an ad hoc, spontaneous gathering of things. And it wasn't like someone said, okay, well, we really need a banger 15-minute testimony. It's kind of like, hey, these 20 people down here are praying. I can just see the people down front with the lanyards on going, okay, we've got like 20 people praying right now. And I can see this person's crying. Let me go check on them just to care for them. So they go over to the prayer counselor and say, what's going on with so and so over there? And the prayer counselor says, this person just prayed to receive Christ. And they're like, man, that's awesome. And the guy gets up with tears in his eyes, says, can I address the audience? I want to tell them about my confidence in Jesus. And now the staff member has to make a choice, an editorial decision. Okay, where are we? How do we do this? What's the best way? How much do we coach him? How much do we not? But more often than not, when it was something spontaneous, they were just like, yeah, sounds great. So they look up at the musicians and give them like the sign, and the musicians receive it. And then that guy gets on stage, or the prayer counselor gets on stage and says, I just prayed with this person here. He wants to tell you something. And the guy says, I just prayed to receive Christ. And everyone cheers like you're at a soccer match, like you scored a goal, and people go crazy. And then someone on stage will say, this is the way that the Lord works normally. If you're someone who wants to believe in Jesus, we would love to talk to you about that. We have counselors down front, or your prayer team down front. It's like a sushi belt, just bringing you the food constantly. And as soon as you get full, another dish comes by on the sushi conveyor belt that just keeps coming. And somehow the Lord is the one driving all of this.
And this is going on for 300 hours, what total of 15, 16 days, nonstop. It's 24/7, basically, right? That
Yeah. Yeah.
activity is happening within Hughes Auditorium. And
Yep.
so this, I've actually heard people try to decide, is this a revival or is this not a revival? Now you're a revival kind of historian. What's the definition of revival, and is this legitimately one?
What's the thing we call it now? Well, awakening. There's a renewal moment. There's an awakening that seems to be happening there. Some people seem to be spiritually awakened. We will see whether it bears fruit. And if it does, it's a revival. But we can't say there's this awakening that's taking place and some renewal is happening there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, what about the 1970 event that happened at Asbury? So, that was 53 years ago. Can that now be called a revival?
Um, you know, as I think about Methodist and Wesleyan historians, I'm uh, I'm almost confident that they call that a revival, and it has been enough time, and because they saw fruit that was born out from it. And the late '60s and early '70s, there are some historians who will call that the Fourth Great Awakening in America. First Great Awakening is in the 1730s in Northampton, Massachusetts, with Jonathan Edwards, and then along the coast, east coast of America, as George Whitefield comes over and is preaching. And there's similar things that are happening, awakenings happening in England and Europe that are happening there. You have the Second Great Awakening, which is um, end of the 1700s into the early to mid 1800s in America. Charles Finney is a person who is of interest there, and there's some things that are going on in the New York area, kind of Pennsylvania, Ohio, that kind of area. And historians typically tend to say those are great awakening moments. There's first and second. And I think there are people who are interested in revivals and awakenings who would say there's a third great awakening that's kind of the end of the 1800s to the early part of the 20th century with Billy Sunday and Billy Graham and maybe Dwight Moody and these kinds of things that are happening there. And then the fourth great awakening would be the 60s and 70s in America, really with the Jesus people. So this movie that's just come out, The Jesus Revolution, it would be that kind of crowd. And Asbury certainly is caught up in what seems to be happening broadly in America that sort of originates out of the countercultural hippie movements in California and then seems to spread ideologically, phenomenologically, culturally into other parts of the United States. So I think, yes, that's a revival. I think that would be fair. And we definitely see fruit from that. And Methodist and Wesleyan historian will tell you yes, I think as well.
Yeah. So we've got the terms awakening, we got the terms revival, and then we have revolution, which is what they've tagged the movie, Jesus Revolution. And so I don't think it's exactly a coincidence. I mean, I think it's a God thing that the awakening happening in Asbury, and then within days, the Jesus Revolution is a box office smash, did double, even more, in terms of attendance and revenue than they even thought possible. And it's still in theaters today. So you saw the movie. Can you give us your quick review? So those who have not seen the movie yet, what's your thoughts about the depiction of that era through the movie?
Yeah, conspiracy theorists might say that the Asbury revival was somehow stirred up in service of the promotion of Jesus Revolution. I would call bunk on any of that if you hear this on the internet. If any of your listeners are watching and go, oh, well, this guy named, discernment blogger 1474 said that actually what was happening, maybe I want to take all claims at face value and be gracious with them.
But is the basis of it valid?
Yeah, I think so. And because Greg Laurie was in the center of it, and he's, I think, in the center of this movie, at least the book. I mean, he's not going to say the principal characters in this. And if you've ever read any of the story, you'll find it. It's three men. It's Chuck Smith, who starts Calvary Chapel and the Calvary Chapel network of churches. It's Lonnie Frisbee, who, along with John Wimber and Chuck Smith, but then John Wimber and he help really spearhead the Vineyard Church movement. And then it's Greg Laurie and his wife, and kind of the love story of how they come together. Those are the three people. So those three people were at the beginning of this thing that happens, this revival of the 1960s and 70s in America. That is accurate. The sequence of the way things all happened, I think, reflects accurately the way it's been documented in Greg's book and elsewhere as people have tried to understand what happened there. And so from that standpoint, and I would say the way that the film portrays the 60s and early 70s in America, I think is pretty accurate, because the soundtrack, there's a few songs that maybe come a little bit later that they play. For example, they play Fleetwood Mac's "Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow," right? And I think that's maybe in the 90s when that comes out. But for the most part, they're picking songs and clothing style and depictions of politics and the political scene in America accurately, and I would say conveying it well, and being true to the story of the birth of Calvary Chapel and Greg's church, which becomes Harvest in Riverside. So yes, I would say that's historically accurate. You didn't ask me for this, but I'll just go ahead and tell you, for me, it's probably one of the best faith films I've ever seen, just in terms of its ability to tell a story and to give you a few laughs and some really important, powerful, sentimental moments, to also have a little bit of a message in it that I think everyone probably needs to hear, and to tell, I would say, a compelling love story about these two young people trying to figure out life, trying to figure out if they love each other. And I mean, it's worth your time. Look, spend $15, go to the movie theater, and support this thing. It's good. I was looking, I think it's like 21 million at the box office.
Something like that,
And
yeah.
maybe like a 14 or $15 million budget, as best I can see. So good job by them.
Yeah.
That's good. And
Well,
you've got Kelsey Grammer. You've got legitimate actors in this, like that are, Kimberly Williams Paisley and the other. I mean, it's good.
I just really want to thank you for being with me today, because I know we're kind of running out of time, and but this has been so enlightening, and I've been so totally encaptured by this whole story of Asbury, that you've really shown some light on it and given some insight about it, which I really appreciate. So what can we do to support you? Is there something that you're involved in, or that we can pray for you ongoing?
Yeah, you know what? You could be praying. Here's the best way: be praying for Florida Baptists. So I'm part of First Baptist Church of Orlando, and we're part of the Southern Baptist Convention, but in particular the Baptist Convention in the state of Florida. And we just had our annual challenge meetings that our campus hosted, and then I went to another conference yesterday in West Palm Beach at Family Church, which is a Southern Baptist church there. And I am just I am aware that God is trying to care for Florida through all of his churches, but especially through his Baptist churches in Florida. And if you could pray for anything, just pray that we will catch a vision for the Great Commission, and we will put everything aside, lay it all aside, to really love God well and love people well. And if you could just pray for that, that'd be awesome.
Pastor Doug, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your story. And I know our listeners are going to get a lot out of this, and I appreciate your help and your time today. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks. Glad to be with you.
Well, there you have it. An amazingly great insider's look at the awakening, the revival, and/or the revolution going on in America. As always, please give us the benefit of a like or a subscribe or send it along to a friend. Thanks for doing that, and have a blessed day.